Okay, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Planning and Transportation Commission for Wednesday, May 29th. Ms. Dow, can you please take the roll?
Chair Chang,
Present.
Vice Chair Rekdal,
Here.
Commissioner Aiken,
Here.
Commissioner Heckman,
Present, appearing remotely with just cause and no one over 18 in the room with me.
Commissioner Liu,
Present.
Commissioner Suma,
Present.
Commissioner Templeton.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Great. So our first agenda item is public comment. Are there any speaker cards? I don't think so.
I have no request to speak.
And then is there anything online? Let me take a look. Nope. Okay, great. On to agenda changes, additions, and deletions.
We have no agenda changes or deletions.
Okay, great. And then on to city official reports. Ms. French.
Yes. Good evening, Amy French, Chief Planning Official. I wanted to, first of all, call attention to an email that I sent out before 5 today, so fairly recently, noting our Office of Transportation staff is unlikely to be able to make it tonight, but forwarded on a statement regarding the Wilkie Bridge subcommittee. Some items there. I suppose I could read it off. Based on the online community survey and bridge subcommittee members' input, we will leave the anti-slip fiberglass deck strips as is, and we'll replace the rubberized coating section that was installed in the second area with a sharp turn with the anti-slip fiberglass deck strips as part of our upcoming bridge repairs project, which is going into construction in late summer. So I've done my bit for transportation.
I'll give you a summary there. Thanks, Raphael, wherever you are. I asked him yesterday and he dug that up really quickly. Wilkie Way is a wooden bridge and it gets slippery when it's wet. And they used to put rubber mats on it and then those broke up and broke off. So they tried about a year ago 2 tests. One was you would actually take some fiberglass non-slip and screw them into the wood boards. There's a sharp curve where they did that. Another spot they painted on, it almost looks like just paint with sticky stuff in it, non-slip. And that seemed to be almost as good to me. And so they're going to do that for everything where they have that fiberglass on that sharp turn, they're going to leave that. So that's going to be good to get it done before rainy season.
Okay, back to planning component of our item 1, which is city official reports. This gives you the breakdown that we anticipate for the summer. As you might recall, the Commission decided to cancel the meeting of July 31st. So we're sending projects forward and backward from there. And this is the lineup that we're anticipating for the summer. I'm not sure if the June 26th item from transportation is going to hold. That might be pushed forward, but this is where we are at the moment. I wanted to note that I learned.
Ms. French, did you have a slide to share for us?
Am I not sharing a slide?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, okay. Let me try again. I thought I was sharing. Share. Now am I sharing? Yay. Okay. Take 2. This is the breakdown, the anticipated lineup for the summer of Planning and Transportation Commission meetings. And I was just noting some anticipated dates here that kind of in flux. These are always, tentative until we actually have the report in hand and can advertise it and all of that. So for now, this is what we're looking at. Note that the retail report that we worked so hard to get through the Planning and Transportation Commission process with our subcommittee and everything to try to get it before council June 10th. That slipped to June 18th. And now I hear that the amount of items and such before the council break is too much, and there's some more discussion needs to happen. So likely we will put that off till August 5th council, and we'll have an opportunity as a commission to have another powwow before then, if we can figure out what to bring forward. That would probably be the July 10th meeting. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about upcoming dates? As always, let me know if you're planning an absence. You get to take summer breaks. So the next slide here is just council target dates for May and June. I did slip in August there at the end, again, because of that retail study report. But these are the anticipated items coming before council. You'll note that I put a note here about these are not viewed by the PTC. Some of these items, such as the Quarry Road extension, have not come to the PTC, but it's of interest to the Planning and Transportation Commission. So if you're representing in June in June, this is all June, there are only a couple of these that the Planning and Transportation Commission actually saw, which was the June 10th item on the California Avenue CUP and the June 17th item, which is the bike lanes on El Camino Real, and of course the NVCAP, which is June 18th. So, yeah.
Ms. French, I have a question for you. So I believe Commissioner Liu is our rep for June, but I believe he also had to recuse for NVCAP. Is that correct? So then we should move on to the backup. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it'll be myself.
Who's backup?
I am.
Oh,
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask.
that you know who you are. Perfect. Okay. If no questions, then I suppose we can move on, and I will switch presentations.
So our first action item for today is review and recommendation to Finance Committee and the City Council on the proposed 2025 to 2029 capital improvement plan and comprehensive plan compliance.
Okay, why is this not? There we go. It's thinking. Okay. The presentation is thinking, and I will start presenting while it thinks. So tonight we are here to review the 16 new 2025 to 2029 capital improvement projects for consistency with the comprehensive plan and forward the findings to council. The commission can also review the programs as a whole and propose suggestions to improve the efficiency. The commission can also identify projects it feels are missing from the existing CIP list and propose those for next year. Staff will communicate the findings of tonight's meeting through a letter to the City Council. To assist your review tonight and answer any questions on the CIPs, we have in the Zoom room staff from different city departments. I believe we have Budget, Public Works, Utilities, Police, and Community Services. We'll see. So this is the letter that currently says from Doria Suma chair, but we now have a new chair. And so we'll fix that letter for signature. So after tonight's meeting, we'll go ahead and get that done and then forward that to City Council. So every year, the city departments identify new CIPs based on citywide infrastructure needs and City Council priorities. This year, 16 new CIPs have been included in the capital budget. Staff has used the same analysis and metrics of previous years to determine comp plan consistency. Each CIP is linked to a primary comprehensive plan element and a goal, policy, and program which it aligns to. Staff has added information on types of boards, commissions, and if an environmental review is required. So this slide shows 194 capital improvement projects that were included in the capital budget, 16 of which are new. So these are described in attachment B of the staff report. And just as in previous years, we focused our analysis on only the new projects at this time. The report in your packet said 270 cited capital improvement projects. That was kind of an error, even though there's that many projects in the system. There's only the 194 that were funded in the 2025 budget book. So the other CIPs are continuing and have already been reviewed by the PTC in previous years. So this shows that we have 5 CIPs that align with community services and facilities element. And we have 5 CIPs aligning with the natural environment element, and 3 CIPs that align with the safety and transportation elements, 3 each. Some examples of building facilities, upkeep, maintenance, and technology upgrade CIPs. You can see here on the screen: children's theater lighting, art center, radio replacement, and fire equipment. Then we have some examples of transportation and traffic improvement, transportation improvement CIPs, which is Cal Avenue, parking improvements, traffic intersection, accessibility improvements, Charleston Road, Alma, railroad crossing, and safety improvements. Then we have the distribution that shows, I think that's 42% for the natural environment, 36% for CSD, land use transportation is 8% each, and then safety is 5%. So we come to the recommendation that we seek commission finding that these CIPs are consistent with the comp plan and recommend council concur with the finding. Thank you. And if you have any questions for the team members, I'm just going to check and see. Yeah, we have someone from CSD, someone from Administrative Services, and someone from Public Works, and someone from Fire. Yeah, several folks from those departments.
Okay, so light them up if you've got any clarifying questions. We'll start with Commissioner Rectal and then Commissioner Aiken.
I'm not sure if this is a question for Amy or for Chief Blackshire, but one of the new ones is the eucalyptus tree removal. And looking in the funding, it's not funded this year. Page 13 of the big binder, it lists 7 different CIPs that are on the list but aren't funded at all. What's the status, and why was this introduced but not funded at all? Is it low priority?
So seeking those of you who are attending from other city departments. Oh, Paul, excellent. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul Harper, Office of Management and Budget. So this project actually is funded in fiscal year 2025. So that's the first year of the 5-year CIP that we're looking for or looking at. Fiscal year 24 would be the current year that we're in. And so what we're reviewing now is for anything that's starting in fiscal year 2025 and beyond as part of this new 5-year CIP plan.
Okay, but in the booklet that we have, it says it's not funded. You look on page 13 of the booklet.
Page 13
of the big binder. Yeah, the big binder, page 13.
When I looked at the specific item, it was funded. I don't know what page it was though.
Yeah, I guess I would reference you to page 212 of the capital budget, the fiscal year 25 proposed capital budget. That's where the project page would be.
Oh, I wonder if I used the link in the soft copy, and I wonder if that's linking to an old version. Okay. Okay, that is good. That answers my question. Thank you.
Commissioner Liu? Commissioner Aiken?
Thank you, Chair. My question is about packet page 19. That's item number 5, the Arrastradero Creek gas line repair. And the question is which elements it might be most consistent with. I found it odd that it was associated with policy N 7.1, which is specifically about electricity needs, and wondered if maybe S 1.13.4, which is enhance the safety of city-owned natural gas pipeline operations, might be a better fit. So I'm curious as to why the decision was made to use N 7.1 instead.
Let's see. So do we have someone from utilities? Roger, are you from utilities, perhaps? I see you are unmuted. Roger?
Roger is not from utilities.
Ah, sorry. I just see one word there. Well, so. Sorry?
The budget guy, maybe?
Oh, Paul is with the ASD. I don't have this binder you referred to see. I mean, I have the packet page 19 is what we're talking about for anyone out there who wants to follow along. Item 5, gas line repair at Arrastradero Creek appears to be a utilities item, wastewater and water pipelines, and the policy that's referred to is in the energy section with utilities department as the lead on the project.
And Commissioner Aiken was suggesting that which part of the comp plan would be more relevant?
Yeah,
Yes.
what caught my eye was that it's currently associated with a program that's all about electricity needs. And my first thought was, oh, are we running a gas-powered generating plant down there somewhere? And so I did a quick search through the comp plan looking for other more likely sections. And
Okay.
S 1.13.4 is the one that cropped up because it's specifically about natural gas pipeline operations. So no urgency about this. I just wondered why it was done the way it was done.
I don't have an answer for that. And if no one else is here from utilities to answer that, then it can't happen tonight. But S 113.4 I've had noted, and I can follow up with the utilities staff tomorrow.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So, sorry, Paul Harper, Office of Management and Budget. So we rely on the planning department to actually align these with the comprehensive plan. So I believe the person who did that's actually not here this evening. I will say if that's a correction that is recommended, I would include that in the letter to the Finance Committee, and we can make that correction as part of the adopted budget for that project page.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question for Mr. Harper. So I noticed that there were several of the 16 new CIPs that don't hit the fiscal 25 budget. And somehow my recollection is that the last time we did this, that the most of the time that projects do. So is it just a planning exercise that it's because, for example, if you look at the Children's Theater lighting system, there's nothing until fiscal 28 and 29. And so is it just because we know that this is something that's coming down the pipeline and that we're planning ahead for it?
Yes, essentially, yes. The 5-year capital plan is a plan where we try to put in needs of items that we know are coming along. ideally, we try to get them in there as early as we can when we have information that is somewhat accurate and we can program in dollars and scope and timeline. A lot of the time things kind of pop up as somewhat emergencies. And so that's why a number of them kind of fall into the first couple of years. But when possible, we do try to put them in there as far out as we can, just so that we have the plan in there. You know, things can move around. I will say when council adopts the budget, they are only adopting the first year of the 5-year plan. So in this case, it would be 2025. The rest of the years are used for planning, and essentially we reference back to them if there are changes made going into the next 5-year cycle. But yeah, to answer your question, yes, they are put in there with the idea that we want to plan ahead as far as we can.
Thank you. And then I had a little bit more of a specific question about the third new CIP, which is the Palo Alto Art Center ceramics equipment. And this is on package page 18. There was a note that said that the Art Center has not had a sustainable plan to maintain equipment for the ceramics program, unlike nearby municipalities. And I'm wondering, is that going to be something that we're changing? Or is this just going to be kind of a one-time Band-Aid patch? Mr. Doe, you're on mute.
Good evening, Commissioners. Lam Do, Superintendent Open Space, Parks and Golf, representing Community Services this evening. The maintenance of the ceramics equipment is not funded at the time. We are asking for the facility to be upgraded and some of the equipment to be replaced. And then from there, we will be planning and looking at how we want to, in the future, maintain or plan for replacing that budget. But we haven't reached that point yet. So for now, we're asking for funding to upgrade and replace the equipment that's needed.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to keep going because I'm not seeing other lights. One more question about the number 6 city radio replacement program. Just a question about this is the report on page 19 notes that the replacement program will be the first time digital radios have been replaced since the city joined the Regional Interoperability Authority. So I'm wondering when, just for context, when was that? When did that take place? I remember that it was in the news, but
Paul Harper with Office of Management Budget. I will throw out a date, but I wouldn't quote me on this. I want to say it was in like 2014 or 2015 is when we started the replacements previously.
Thank you. Okay, and then I think this is my second to last question. So on number 13, or packet page 21, this is regarding the stormwater improvements and the capacity upgrades. When I was looking at the binder, and I unfortunately didn't note what page this all was in the binder, I noticed that Lewis Road is slated for 2029, so much later than these two, which are earlier. And so my question is it because these are kind of emergency or suddenly more urgent improvements because of the flooding, or what's like it jumped ahead in line, so I was wondering what happened there.
Yes. Hi, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Holly Boyd. I'm the Assistant Director for Public Works. Yes, it's the latter. Lewis Road was previously in the budget to work on next out of the 13 stormwater fee fund priority projects. But given the New Year's Eve flooding in 2022, we prioritized Hamilton and Center over Lewis and pushed Lewis out because of the impact that it will have on the residents in those neighborhoods.
Okay, and then I also looked in terms of when the funding is really being used for the most part for the Hamilton system upgrades and the Center Drive capacity upgrades. It looks like the Hamilton system happens first, right? And is the staggering simply a workflow management issue or a budgetary issue, or because if they're urgent, that's what I was wondering about. What's the timing based on?
It's both. We have a limited number of staff, and we also collect the stormwater management fee on an annual basis. So the Hamilton Avenue system is prioritized first. The design will be starting in July once this project's approved, and then go to construction the following year. And so while we could have asked for a loan from the general fund or something like that, it's really a workload issue because of the limited staff, and then also the disruption to the neighborhoods because they are in the same neighborhood. We're staggering them to follow year by year.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have questions from Commissioner Liu. No? Commissioner Suma?
I had a question, I had an interest in number 9, the eucalyptus tree removal as well. And I'm just wondering, our CIP descriptions, when you look them up on their page by page number in the big binder, don't tell you much more than the summaries do, a little bit more information. And this is a program I have sort of negative feelings about, but I'm wondering where one can look up and find the exact locations of the trees slated for removal and a little bit more about the process of this. And if you direct me to it, I can just do that offline. I don't know that the whole commission needs to hear about it. Like if the stumps are going to be ground out, or if the stumps will be left and they'll be treated with some kind of chemical, these kinds of details. Where would I find that?
Commissioner Suma, this is Lomdo again with Community Services Department. An assessment was done between Community Service Department and the Office of Emergency Services to identify the trees that we would like to have removed. I can provide that information to staff liaison French, and then from there, perhaps she can forward it to you as well.
Okay, thank you. That would be very helpful. It was the Urban Forestry Department involved?
That is correct.
They were, okay. Sorry, you maybe said that. I didn't hear that. Okay.
There were multiple departments, OES, Office of Emergency Services, Urban Forestry, and Community Services.
Okay, thank you very much. That would be helpful.
Commissioner Templeton?
Thanks. I appreciate you bringing that up, Commissioner Suma. I also noted this one, but for a different reason, and I would love to hear what concerns you have if you do want to share them. Don't necessarily assume we don't want to know. But my understanding is that eucalyptus trees provide a fire hazard for the communities in which they're present. It's not mentioned really. Oh, there it is, fire safety. Yeah, so is that under safety? What's PG? What does PG mean?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Templeton. Each CIP is identified by nomenclature, 2 letters, and then a series of 5 digits. The 2 letters, first 2 letters represent the program area where the CIP is to be managed, and PG in this case is parks and golf, which falls under the Division of Open Space, Parks and Golf.
Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, so I think, just looking a little closer and listening to Commissioner Suma's concerns, like if this was a fire safety program, I think that would make a lot more sense to me. And I guess we'll hear from planning department since you're the ones who classified them. Is that what the speakers said before? Ms. French?
Yes, Chitra Moitra is not here this evening to tell you her thinking about that particular one. You're looking in the binder. I don't have the binder, just the packet.
I'm not looking at the binder. I'm looking at the
Yeah.
packet.
Okay, can you say again which?
Number 9, eucalyptus tree removal.
Packet page 20.
Thank you, Chair.
So I heard Lamdo say that he has some details he will send to me that I will forward to the Planning and Transportation Commission.
Yes,
that
that's
not
what I was
get to your-
that's what I was asking you to confirm. Yes, if you'll do that, that'd be great.
Of course, I will do that. As soon as I receive it, I will forward it on to the PTC.
So the concern here is how are the trees being removed, if they're being removed safely, and does it provide fire protection? So therefore, is it classified properly or improperly? Thank you.
And if I could add to that, it's the departments will work together in regards to managing the project. Just because it's identified initially as one PG, it may or may not remain there. We have at times, depending on the complexity or the level of the project, collaborate with the departments or transfer projects to other departments as well.
That's wonderful, and I agree. I'm glad that we'll look closer at this, but specifically, the community is going to have a different feeling about removing trees in parks versus improving fire safety. So I think that's just something to think about. Thanks.
Okay, one last clarifying question from me. This is packet page 21, number 15. This is the scheduled vehicle and equipment replacement that we see every single year. So my question is, when I was looking in the binder at the item, the expense was pretty much the same every single year, except that in 2029, it jumps up by about $600,000. And so I was wondering if anybody could give a little visibility into why that's happening. I don't know which staff member it would be. Oh, hello.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Denitra Ballman, Public Works Fleet Department. I can take this question. In fiscal year 2029, I'm not sure what the budget total is that you have, but we have approximately $3.5 million allocated for replacements that year. Is that what you're showing?
I didn't bring my binder, but if I remember correctly, it was about 3.5 million every single year. And then in 2029, it jumped up to like almost 2 million.
Yeah, 4.2.
Okay. So I will go back to that list because I'm actually looking off of the fiscal year 29 that I had submitted, and I've got it's at 3.5 million. So let me get back to you on that. I don't know, Paul, if you have a list in front of you, but I certainly don't have that one.
I don't have the list. I guess I will say that the city is in the process of working towards replacing the fleet with electric vehicles where possible. And so we are trying to do that in the earlier time where possible, but I think going out to the end of the 5-year plan, increasing the dollars because those vehicles do cost more to replace at this point in time. We're looking at kind of increasing the budget so that we have the capacity to do that in the out years.
And that wouldn't be just for FY29, but yeah.
Okay, great. That does answer. It sounds like there would be a ramp up in EVs purchased to replace non-EVs in 2029, and that's why we're budgeting more for it. Because my next question would have been, are we replacing with EVs? But it sounds like you've answered that. So thank you. And it looks like we've got one more question from Commissioner Suma. What? Okay, from Commissioner Liu.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask about item number 12, the Alma Charleston Railroad crossing safety improvements. So it looks like the budget is around $1.3 million over the next 2 years, but for the design phase only. I was wondering if someone could comment on what the broader scope and budget of that project would potentially be projected to be, and also if there was any scope or consideration of upgrading the crossing so that could support a quiet zone. So yeah, I would appreciate any answers there.
Looks like we have Philip coming. Oh, great. Philip, did you hear that?
Yes. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so this is actually really similar to a project that PTC had approved for Churchill. So just a very similar project to that we did at the Churchill crossing. We are doing, entering the design phase, but we're, hoping in a similar fashion to get Section 130 funding for similar to what we did for the Churchill Avenue crossing for this project to move into the future phase for construction. And then the question about the quiet zones, no, this is not the quiet zones project. However, we do have that project, which is already proceeding on it's not on the same timeline. It's already moving forward. We're already starting the study for the other crossings other than Palo Alto Avenue, which is already in the final design phase.
Yep. All right, thank you. That's helpful clarification.
Okay, seeing no more.
My pleasure.
Seeing no more lights from commissioners for clarifying questions, I wanted to see if there was any cards for public comment on this item or anybody online.
I have no speaker cards or raised hands.
Okay, since there are no public comments, now if the commission has any additional comments, not clarifying questions, but comments. I think we kind of blended everything this time. I would be curious, it sounds like since our job for this item is to ensure that each of these new CIPs are consistent with the comprehensive plan, and because Commissioner Aiken raised the issue that perhaps the gas line repair is kind of matched to a portion of the comp plan that might not be as appropriate as a different one. I was wondering if Commissioner Aiken could share with us what the language is for the item that you thought was more appropriate.
Sure, it's really pretty simple. It says this item is to enhance the safety of city-owned natural gas pipeline operations. So it's in the safety segment of the element of the comp plan rather than natural environment.
That seems to make sense. So let's see. And then we have Commissioner Suma.
Thank you, Chair. I support at least adding Commissioner Aiken's suggestion. That seems to be a really good idea. If not, reevaluating that, but for sure that seems like an appropriate change. And then to answer Commissioner Templeton, the eucalyptus tree removal, I think, is a very separate issue for open spaces and in public parks in the city. And I've always thought it was a bit weird in open spaces to target some eucalyptus trees. I don't think anybody should ever plant a eucalyptus tree, but where they exist in wooded areas, and often it's by creeks because they like a bit more water, they were introduced in 1853. So they've been a part of open spaces for a very long time, and they do provide very valuable habitat, even though they're unwanted trees, but they are a fire hazard. And so that's why I was curious about what kind of methods they were using to remove the trees. If you're deep into, Foothill Park, in some locations it wouldn't be disruptive. In other locations, I feel it could be more disruptive and isn't really worth the effort of removing them. And I don't know if they fell the trees and leave them when they are, because where they fall, because rotting material is also very valuable in a forested area and provides habitat. So that's just, I've always thought it's not a hill I would die on to save the eucalyptus, but I think it's really important in urban areas where they're more likely to cause a problem, and in areas where it's more kind of that I'm lukewarm on it as a value add to our natural areas. And I hate to see our natural areas overmanaged, if that helps.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? If not, I can take a motion.
I'll make a motion. I'd be happy to make a motion to move staff recommendation with the addition of Commissioner Aiken's comment or correction, I guess it is.
Second.
All right, do we have any?
I have a question for Commissioner Suma. You don't want to ask them for more information that you mentioned earlier in your comments? I think
They're
should
going to provide that. I don't
Yeah.
think it needs to, this is a program that's already been going on to a certain extent. I just wanted to be able to know more about it myself.
Okay.
And actually, it's not all in open spaces. If you look in the big binder, it's also in Eleanor Party Park. So I'm not against it. I'm neutral on it as being a benefit for our open spaces, but it is something that the city has been pursuing. So.
Well, I think your point is well taken, that there's not enough information for the public to get from what we currently have. So if you wanted to add that, we could add it to the motion. If not, just leave it as a comment and let's take your point as well meant.
If you'd like to add it as an amendment, it's fine with me. I wouldn't say no. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
You're the maker. I'm not going to worry about it. If you want to add it, you can add it. And if not, it's okay.
Would my colleagues like me to add that? Okay, so then I would say, I would add a clause that says, re-examine the value and cost of removing eucalyptus in open areas, the value to the open space maintenance and cost to the city, and consider it. Which
Does the second accept that change?
To me, it's more of a general issue of just providing more information about what's being removed and where it's being removed. That, to me, my mind is more interested in that than actually the cost breakdown.
I mean, I don't know if you're saying you would accept it or not.
Oh, I would accept it, but I'm just wondering if we should
Word it differently.
word it differently. Yeah.
Well, why don't you take a crack at it?
Okay. Request that we get more information about where and how many the eucalyptus are being removed.
Well, I think it's also about, I mean, if they're going in with a large crew and dragging a giant tree out, it's really disruptive in a remote location in our open spaces. Whereas if it's along a road, who cares in some ways? So I think it's the details, the operational details, kind of.
So how many, where, and how they're being removed?
Yeah. Okay. That's fine if we want to incorporate, that's fine. I mean.
Okay, so I'm going to try and restate the motion just so we know where we are on this. So we're moving the staff recommendation with the addition of Commissioner Aiken's reclassification for the alignment of the gas line repair at Estradera Creek with the comp plan, which was S1.13.4. And then also requesting more information on the location, number, and method of removal for the eucalyptus trees.
That sounds fine.
Is there any discussion about this? Okay, then Ms. Dow, could you please call the vote?
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Summa,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rectal,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
motion carries 7-0.
Okay, great. Moving on to the next action item, which is ordinance of the Council of the City of Palo Alto amending chapters 18.14, 18.18, 18.30, 18.42, 18.52, and 18.77, and adding chapter 21.11 of the Palo Alto Municipal Code to clarify existing regulations to and implement recent state housing laws. Could we have the staff presentation, please?
Yes. Thank you. So this evening, in your report and on the screen are showing 5 state laws. 4 of these went into effect, or 2 of these went into effect January 1st. Another one is going into effect July 1st. And 2 previously went into effect in prior years. And we have been operating without changes to our code under state law. So we are taking the opportunity to make some modifications to our code or request Planning and Transportation Commission review of these changes that we will then bring to the City Council for adoption. So you can see here we have 3 of these, 2 from this year's effective bills, and then 1 from 2019 that require ministerial review processes. So no discretionary permits required, no CEQA required for projects under these state laws. So this is just to note that we do have existing zoning code chapters that provide streamlined reviews, planning reviews, and so we're relying on those sections as existing in our codes. Then we have some parking items, which were, see, so under this, go backwards a slide, AB 894, AB 2097 are both related to parking. So we have a couple of changes to existing codes for that with, trying to address the loading and bicycle facility requirements, putting in something about the shared parking agreements. And we have something in there about TDM programs as well, addressing AB 2097. And then we have some other items that are related to just changes that were needed to be made, just clarifications, because we were just taking the opportunity to do this, sort of non-substantive changes. And then the last one there on this screen is we are anticipating council's action on the NV cap on June 18th. And so we are proactively coming forward with a section for late night uses and activities that would add these zone districts that are in the NV cap, so that when that council takes action on that, we have then in August, we'll come back with this, these set of ordinance revisions that would then enact, facilitate late night use and activity reviews in those new zones. So, Mr. Yang is here to weigh in on some adjustments here regarding EVSE related equipment and accessibility.
Thanks, Amy.
Thanks.
So after the staff report was published, staff identified 2 additional non-substantive changes, or 2 additional changes, one responding to state law and another being a non-substantive clarification. So the first one is a response to AB 970, which was operative last January. And that section requires cities to reduce their parking requirements if a if a retrofit to install EVSC would result in the loss of a parking space. So we had actually already provided for this in our code, but we had some provisions that could be read to conflict with AB 970. AB 970 doesn't have a limit on how many parking spaces can be removed to accommodate EVSE, and the city's version did have a maximum of 10% of the existing stalls, or one stall, whichever is greater. In practice, that probably was not likely to come up, but just to avoid any confusion, we're recommending this change. So next slide. And then the other change that came up after packet publication was the clarification in our subdivision code to allow tentative maps to be placed on the council's consent agenda. This is something that the city staff has done with some regularity over the years, but there's been some confusion about whether item on a consent calendar could satisfy a public hearing requirement. So we're trying to resolve that confusion, just to say the city council simply needs to consider the map at a public meeting rather than using the words public hearing. And that's also consistent with the State Subdivision Map Act, which refers to public meetings rather than public hearings.
Jumping back in as well on the SB 684, which I was thinking would be a great interest, being that it's kind of like the SB 9 that came through a few years ago that we prepared objective standards for. The SB 684 projects allow up to 10 parcels, and it allows a ministerial planning entitlement process similar to SB 9. But this is just for multiple family zoned properties of a certain size. And so we do have objective standards for 3 or more housing units that we use for those types of projects. We have the SB 9 objective standards. So depending on what projects come in, we can use those in the interim, but we do think we need to do some tweaking and create some SB 684 standards, objective standards specific to those types of projects as well. And then also have a process that we call the SB 684 process to come through with initial prelim designs, to have conversations with staff, work through what they're thinking to submit formally. I think that is the last slide. So I'm going to take our slides back to the first one to help with focus on the state law items, perhaps, if you would like to talk about those first.
Okay, so first let me ask the commissioners if they have any clarifying questions before we take any public comment. So let's try and keep it to clarifying questions. Commissioner Rectal and then Commissioner Suma.
If you go to slide 10, they talk about this voluntary code review. Can you give me more detail exactly what a voluntary code review is?
Yes, so a voluntary code review would be something where we, highly encourage people to come through. We do this with the individual review program. It's not a requirement that they come through and show their concepts for a new two-story home in a neighborhood, but we highly encourage it. They come in, we have a discussion, we look at the context, we talk through the individual review guidelines and how they're doing with their plans. So that would be an example of a voluntary process.
Okay, and if they don't want to do it, they don't have to do it.
Correct.
Okay, but it'd add value because then they don't have to worry about passing code.
Yeah, so the idea there, it's a carrot rather than a stick. It's suggesting that they will have more efficiency when they do finally put more detailed development drawings on paper to submit for building permit if they've had preliminary discussions with staff before they, hardline some of their choices that may not follow our objective standards
Okay,
or other codes.
that's useful. Thank you. Hannah, how does that differ from the ministerial planning entitlement process?
So,
Go ahead.
yeah. So a ministerial entitlement process would basically just be a planning a planning review against objective standards, and it'd be at a staff level. But the main difference is applicants would have to come through the planning department before they went to get a building permit, and so they would have to come in and submit their plans for planning to check them against the objective standards. And then they would need to get that approval, that entitlement from the planning department before going to the building permit process. So that's in contrast with the voluntary code review approach where, you could just go straight to a building permit and then your plans will get checked against the objective standards as part of the building permit plan check. But there's no first step at just the planning department.
Okay, but the ministerial planning seems pretty streamlined. It's not very onerous. Why would we not want to do that?
Well, what we found with SB9 is that it is the voluntary process is useful for many applicants, but if you've got someone who feels confident, we don't want to, require more process than is necessary.
Okay, and because we don't think that it's going to add value, we're not going to catch anything. Is that the issue?
Well, I think we feel like we often do, but we're trying to streamline our processes as much as possible.
Yeah, I understand. You don't want people jumping through hoops that aren't needed, but also if there's value added and it's not a terrible hard hoop to jump through, there may be value on both sides. But
and
okay,
the voluntary process is always available, right? Even if it's not required.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Suma and then Commissioner Liu.
I had a question about Senate Bill 684, and it has to do with it applies to projects with up to 10 homes or fewer with size and density criteria in zones allowing multiple family use. And I find the code a little bit conflicting about whether RE, R2, and RMD, which are described as low density residential uses. I think the answer, and then multifamily. So the question really is, does multiple family residential use mean 3 units and more, or does it apply to RE, R2, and RMD, the three low density?
So I'll take a crack at that. Our code defines multiple family residential as 3 or more units. And so that is how we think of that. The RM 15, or sorry, now it's RM 20, RM 30, RM 40. So Albert, would you concur with that?
Yeah, that is the view that I would take as well. And I'll just going to double check one thing and I'll come back to you if I find something more to add.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the next one, I believe, well, I just wanted to confirm what AMI Senate Bill 4 applies to, up to 60 or 80 AMI.
I will check on that and get back to you as well.
Okay, thanks. And then, oh, this is a question on packet page 27. It's also under Senate Bill 5. At the top of the sentence, at the top of the page, second sentence, it says no additional parking requirements can be posed if the development is within half a mile of high-quality public transit or 1 block from a car share vehicle. And I wasn't sure what that one, I totally know what high-quality transit is, but I was really confused about I think it's just the way it's worded, or 1 block from a car share vehicle. Does that mean any shared vehicle that happens to be parked someplace, or what does that mean?
So it's not clearly defined in the law, but we have interpreted it. There's a similar provision in SB 9. We've interpreted it to mean there's a fixed location car share as opposed to a free floating car share. So something like Zipcar that is located within 1 block. And we've also, in our SB 9 regulations, defined, what is a block if it's unclear, a certain number of feet.
Okay, so I think that could be written more clearly. I was a little confused. And then I think I'll save my other question because I don't think it's just clarifying, it's longer. So thank you for those questions, and I'll wait the answers on the first 2.
Okay, Commissioner Liu?
Yes. One question, likely for Albert. There were a couple of references to SB 9 here. I just wanted to very explicitly confirm what the city's thinking was on SB 9 following the court decision.
Yeah, so the Redondo Beach versus Bonta decision held that SB 9 was not enforceable as to charter cities, but the kind of procedural status of that case means that it's only effective for the 5 charter cities that were parties to that litigation. And those cities have also asked the court to declare SB 9 unenforceable for all charter cities throughout California, but the court hasn't made that ruling yet.
Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify then, so the court hasn't made that decision or ruling yet, so we are just waiting? Is that the...
Right. We're waiting to see how the court rules on that request. And then beyond that, once that's kind of the last step for the trial court to take, is to rule on that issue. Once that happens, then the state can also appeal the ruling and ask for it to be stayed. So that's also to be determined.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple clarifying questions. So for SB 684, I just wanted to clarify or confirm my understanding on packet page 26, where it says it requires cities to allow up to the Mullen densities. So does that mean that if something is zoned, for example, if something is zoned RM20, that we have to allow it to become RM30 if that's what the developer wants, and if it is up to 10 units and under 5 acres? Is that what it means?
Right. So we have to allow up to 30 units per acre, that density. It doesn't get the RM30 development standards. It's just that we need to allow at least that density.
That's super helpful. Thank you. And then this is a question I asked in pre-meeting, but I wasn't 100% sure on it. So the description about SB 684 says it requires projects to provide the number of projected units for sites identified in a housing element. And so if a developer chooses to develop less than is projected in the housing element, then the development is not eligible to go through the SB 684 process. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, thank you. And then clarifying question about Senate Bill 4. So I just wanted to make sure I was reading this correctly. So it says ancillary ground floor uses are also permitted. And so things like the child care centers, et cetera, are allowed only on the ground floor, correct?
I believe that's right.
Okay.
Yes.
And then finally for Assembly Bill 894, this is on packet page 27. When would it be used? I'm trying to understand what a shared parking agreement looks like.
Yeah. So I think the vision that the legislature had was you'd have a parking lot that exists someplace, and an adjacent lot wants to redevelop, and the adjacent lot wants to redevelop without providing parking on site. And so the lot that wants to redevelop would approach their neighbor and say, hey, I'd like to do a study showing that your parking spaces are underutilized, and therefore I'd like to be able to share them with you. And then they would have to prepare that parking study showing that, that the parking is in fact underutilized, and that the uses, the timing at which the parking will be in demand for the sharing to properties that are sharing it wouldn't conflict.
Okay, but then ultimately it's up to those two property owners to come to some agreement about how that
right
work, except that we, the city, would then have to approve it. Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
And then I actually have one more question. This is on packet page 28 relating to AB 2097. And this question came up before, I think, in the context of the retail discussion. And it was regarding, so the law says that it doesn't affect requirements for EVSE or ADA parking spaces. And then, but that Palo Alto's interpreting our approach is to only require these spaces when a developer is voluntarily providing spaces. Is that something that we can change? Or, yeah, that's my question.
Yeah. So this is an area where the law is somewhat ambiguous. What does it mean that AB 2097 doesn't affect EVSE and ADA requirements that otherwise would apply? And we've seen cities take differing approaches. The majority approach, I believe, is the one that Palo Alto has taken, which is, ADA and EVSE requirements apply as a percentage of the parking that you provide. And so if you're not providing any parking, there's no percentage to take. Other jurisdictions have, I think a minority of jurisdictions have looked at what is the, parking requirement, the base parking requirement, pretending that AB 2097 did not exist. And then you take the percentage of EVS spaces to find the number of EVSE and ADA spaces that would be required. And then you require that those spaces be provided. And so you would only be providing ADA and EVSE spaces, and there would be no other spaces,
right?
General parking spaces provided.
That would make more sense.
So.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. And then I'll save the rest of my comments about that to later on. Are there any other clarifying questions? Okay, so then are there any public comments? I don't think I saw anything online.
Yes, I have one speaker card from Herb Borak.
Okay, great. Hello.
Hello, commissioners. I also had a question about the status of the City of Redondo Beach case on SB 9. That is that we have programs and policies in the comprehensive plan and regulations in the zoning code to implement that law, which at least for those 5 cities and maybe for the entire state, will be declared unconstitutional for charter cities like Palo Alto. And it seems to me, to be prepared now, if that is the case, to have changes to restore those policies and programs and regulations to what they were prior to the enactment, and also to consider how that affects the way in which we meet our regional housing needs assessment quota. That is, to be continuing to suggest, changes such as this evening when we're not sure whether that is still legislation that we are required to abide by, and that was the rationale for changing our comprehensive plan and our zoning ordinance. And it seems to me we shouldn't just let those things stand, but rather be proactive so that, just as the legislature sometimes has bills which take effect at a later date, and if you look at the code, the statute for a particular code, you can see where it will show both what the law is up to as of a certain date and what it would then change to in a future date. And here we would be having that and at those changes say, if or when a final decision is made that it is unconstitutional, that we would already have those changes, restoring the language ready. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. All right, commissioners, any comments about this item? I got Commissioner Rectal and then Commissioner Suma.
Question for Albert about the public speakers. The SB 9, when we implement SB 9, do we have it contingent on SB 9 being valid law? Or is it just have we changed the law to be consistent with it?
So our SB 9 ordinances do have a provision saying that they will no longer be effective. Our ordinances will, be void if SB 9 is substantially amended or repealed. So we do have some language that might come into play here. But I'll note it doesn't speak to what happens if the law is invalidated by a court. It doesn't specifically mention that.
And in particular, if it's invalidated for just certain cities, then it seems kind of special case. So your opinion is that our ordinances would not change if it was invalidated by the court?
It's something we'd have to look at more carefully if that decision does extend to the rest of the state.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Suma and then Heckman and then Aiken.
Thank you, Chair. So, and thank you to the chair for asking the question about the ADA issue, which came up for me at a previous meeting as kind of a tangential issue. But I think if we have latitude within the law to still provide ADA spots close to the locations, that we have a responsibility to do so. I'm sure that our attorneys have looked at whether this stance is consistent with federal law, but I see no reason. It really bothers me that we would not do this when we can, if we have the ability to do so legally. So I will just say that. And then I would also like to thank Vice Chair Rectal for asking the question about kind of a get out of jail free clause at the end of our ordinances. I think any of these ordinances that were imposed on cities, perhaps unwillingly by some at times, and I think they should all have a clause, so the minute they are such as that is clear that the minute they are no longer considered legal requirements by the state, that we have it written into the ordinance that we will abandon it at that they become null and void, whatever the right legal language is at that time. So I have a strong preference for a change in to require ADA spots if it's legal too. I think that's the biggest takeaway for all of this for me, because the rest of this we have to do. And it seems, I had a lot of questions about 894, so thank you for asking that I forgot to ask. But I think you clarified it, because I read this so many times before I could realize when it would be used. And I came up with the exact thing, that an existing development. And the one thing about this that I think is kind of funny is that we're at a situation, and I know this is extremely true in the research park, where because of the long-term leases, the buildings are still leased, but people aren't showing up and working at them. And so this is an affect of what we don't know how of COVID work from home, and we don't know how to predict how much of that will stay. And so I think a snapshot in time of what 20% vacancy is may not be at all true sometime in the future. So I think we have to be very careful about how we evaluate this vacancy in the sense that we don't know and have no way of knowing now if those buildings will be fully occupied by employees. I have, friends that work in the research park, and they have the same amount of square footage, hundreds of thousands of square feet, and there's 25 people working in the whole thing. So that, not that we have any choice, but in as much as we can be strict in our evaluation of claims of underutilization, I think we should be, or that it should be short-term enough that if the conditions change, that really change it, that can be reevaluated. And then I do think that car share vehicle needs to be defined better to make it clearer. And I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you, Chair. I've got just a few questions and suggestions and comments on the ordinance itself. And I'm wondering if somebody can pull up the ordinance at packet page 31.
Maybe while we're waiting for the ordinance to be pulled up, I wanted to circle back with Mr. Yang to see if he had an answer to the outstanding questions about the 60 versus 80 AMI, and then also sort of what happens to the low density residential.
Right. So the low density residential, I believe the answer is still what Ms. French stated earlier, that it would not apply to those R2, RE districts. As for the affordability provisions, I believe it is they have to be offered to households who make up to 80% of AMI. But then the rent is limited to 70% of AMI.
Thank you. Okay, I think we've got the ordinance in front of us now, so take it away, Commissioner Heckman.
Remind me, please, which page, packet page?
31. Yeah,
Okay.
you're there right now. So scroll up to the recitals, you're at F. Okay, there. And so in section 1, so we're basically folding into our ordinance 5 state laws. And here in section 1, we reference, as near as I could tell, 4 of them, but we didn't reference AB 894. And so I just wanted to point that out to staff. If it was intentional, you had a reason, that's fine. If it was an oversight, you might want to, since you're sort of teeing up each of these other 4, you might want to tee up AB 894. Next, let's go to packet page 34. And I want to go to 181460A2. Be before that, yeah. Packet page, so it probably, there, that was right at the, down a little bit. I think it's right at the top of 34. Here we go. All right, so I'm looking at this first provision here that for the applicable housing, we get the, they use the development standards for the RM30, except there's a call out for FAR. So I wanted to first ask, and I'm sorry, I probably could have looked this up. What is the FAR for RM30?
I would have to, I'm sharing the screen, so I'd have to look that up to say what it is. I believe this 1.25 relates to a housing element implementation ordinance, and it escapes me now which action that led us to this 1.25, but it relates to, and Albert, perhaps you
Yeah.
might remember.
The FAR for the RM30 district, the base FAR is 0.6. Sorry,
Okay.
yeah, 0.6.
0.6. Okay, so we're actually by virtue of this provision allowing the development standards for the RM30, but double the FAR roughly.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And since the purpose of this legislation that's driving us to do this is to promote additional housing, that's not going to run afoul, right? As long as we're not below their limit, we can be above it.
Right. And this that 1.25 number is taken from the standards, and the RM30. This whole set of standards is taken from our treatment of housing opportunity sites in the R1 districts.
All right, and I think that's what Ms. French was alluding to, is this really is a tie into our housing element work to meet our RENA goals.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Next, at the top of packet page 35, so one more page. Let's see, where we're talking about the scroll up, seeking a relief from full compliance with our parking standards. We've routinely responded with a requirement for a TDM, and that makes perfect sense. You know, our code says how much parking we think you're going to need. You're saying you want less. Well, we need some protections in there. Adopting these low to no parking regulations, is there dialogue in the intent for these statutes about encouraging TDMs, that's really the way we want to do this, or limiting TDMs as some kind of restraint? Is there a flavor that's coming out of the state on TDMs?
To my knowledge, there's not really discussion of TDM. It's just sort of a policy direction that, if you don't provide the parking, then it won't be used.
Okay, all right. Well, it makes sense to me in this context that we're doing it, and so I was just curious about that. Toward the bottom of the page, if we can go to, and this is my last one, 18.52040, right here, and my issue is I'm looking for the word feasible. There it is. In subpart D, where feasible. I always get nervous when I see this in a in an ordinance or a statute because it is potentially, you know, fertile ground for disagreement and slowing things down to accommodate and resolve that disagreement. So do we have a definition anywhere in our code of what feasible means? Do we have a different word that we more normally use and is defined? How will an applicant know whether it's feasible or not? I mean, you know, if I can cut down a tree and provide that loading space, does that make it feasible?
Yeah, this may be an area where we can just get rid of that where feasible, and have it be a requirement, and rely on an adjustments exceptions process.
Right. Okay. Well, I'd like staff to consider that. So I don't know that I want to make it part of a motion because I think as you say that, you may have to trail it through the code to make sure that would work. And I don't want to, bind us to something that might not work, but I would like staff to look at that. And those are my questions and comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Aiken.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick ones here. Since we're on packet page 35, let's stick with that first. In 18.52.040, there's a typo. At least it appears to me that there's a typo.
Yeah.
But loading a bicycle parking facilities should be and. I wanted to reinforce my appreciation for the required TDM plans for AB 2097 projects. I'm very happy to see that. I had one concern that Commissioner Suma's comments about SB 894 raised in my mind. The difference between a project that has absolutely no parking at all and one that has the required ADA, otherwise required ADA and EVSE spaces might be really significant because you might have to provide driveways and other space requiring features of the design that otherwise wouldn't exist. So I'm curious as to whether the state might regard that as a constraint on production. And that's all I have for this. Thank you.
So I'll take my turn now. I also, as I alluded to earlier, have a concern about the lack of EVSE and ADA parking. And it's not just ADA for me, it's also EVSE because as part of the retail ad hoc, we saw that it primarily 2 areas in the city that are going to be affected by AB 2097. And those areas of the city for us right now are pretty much built out. And I believe our plan regarding getting EVSE spaces into those areas of the city was to sort of slowly get them in as people rebuilt, remodeled, whatever. But if we're not allowed to put any additional parking requirements in, and our interpretation of the law is such that we're not going to ask people to put in any EVSE spaces, then my concern is that we won't be preparing our city's infrastructure adequately in the areas of University and Cal Ave. And I think that's pretty important. So I wondered if there was a way for us to put that EVSE parking back in. And similarly, I do have the same concern about ADA parking because if we have a new building going up, we can't have a city that just if these areas become much denser, it's not going to be very accommodating if we don't allow, visitors who have ADA needs to not be able to park, or for shoppers who have ADA needs to be unable to shop. And so we've got to think, I think it's short-sighted to not plan for those needs. So I'd be curious about what the other commissioners think about this, and also would like to know from Mr. Yang if it would be reasonable to modify this or to recommend a modification, given that it's not a specific, what's agendized is implementation of this law, but this is a little bit different from that. So I didn't know if it was outside the scope. And then I also hear Commissioner Aiken's concern about requiring, just one ADA spot or just one EVSE spot might also have unforeseen consequences. So I would be curious to hear what the commissioners have to say about that. Mr. Yang?
Yeah, so I don't think it's beyond the scope of the agenda item. But I also don't think that staff is prepared to weigh in on that discussion tonight. So it is something that the PTC could do, but I think staff would probably appreciate the opportunity to have a fuller analysis.
So when does this item go to City Council? Or when's it slated for City Council?
We didn't have it slated to go in June before their break, as we have so many other items. So we have the luxury of some time if needed, if you wanted a portion of this or this discussion on this particular item to come back.
My personal perspective is I would like staff to take a look at it and staff to have a perspective on this and maybe give us some information on it, because it's a pretty big deal for long-term planning. But again, I would like to hear what other commissioners have to say about it. And we'll go to Commissioner Templeton.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm open to a study session as well, and I really like your questions that we've been hearing tonight. I've been thinking about it. Before I moved here, I lived in a city slightly larger than Palo Alto, maybe a few thousand larger, but along the same order of magnitude. And it was already built up 1,000 years ago, so there was no adding spaces. And one of the things that they've done that I thought was so interesting in these shopping areas and downtown, like sub-downtowns, is that they thought about parking differently. They thought about parking as a zone and not on a per property basis. And I thought that was really interesting because they were able to get more parking, more facilities for the parking, but also because of how they structured their pedestrian zones, they were able to have certain types of vehicles permitted to drive closer to the properties. And I thought that was a really cool way to solve it. So for example, there'd be a pedestrian zone in a shopping district, and it would have a space for a tiny little shuttle that would just drive around this area and provide people access to get from their parking facility to their destination very close. And of course, all those vehicles were outfitted for ADA accessibility. So I thought that was an interesting approach, and one of many. I'm sure if we were to study it better and closer, we'd get a variety of different approaches that might be able to be an innovative and interesting solution for Palo Alto. Thanks.
Commissioner Rickdahl?
Yep. To answer your question, I feel strongly about the handicapped, because you can't have a handicap parking a half mile away and have it useful for the handicapped. EVSE, I'm a little more flexible on, and the city could have a bunch of chargers elsewhere. And the problem is that if they don't do that, you really need to distribute it within the properties, but that's not the only solution. The other solution could be cluster them, but clustering of handicap doesn't work.
Commissioner Suma? I think so.
I had one more question on packet page 35, which is the draft ordinance. And it's in 1852-040D also. And it's the new part says where feasible projects providing blah, blah. At least what I'm asking about is it only has to provide at least one on-site showing space for passenger vehicles to be used by taxi cabs and similar transportation and delivery services. Are we limited to one space for all of that? Or can we require more spaces for larger buildings? And that there's so many, so are we limited to one or can we require more?
There's at least one for structures with 50 or
Well, I can imagine this being really inadequate in areas with restricted parking. So doesn't seem adequate to cover all the situations.
One for every 50 dwelling, the spirit of what we're trying to do and accommodate.
Yes, we would also, any project that's utilizing AB 2097 might be too much because with a very short frontage.
That's a good point too. If they're really, really important. And when you don't have passenger loading, so.
Well, I'm a little confused. Street frontage to accommodate what's standing, like where these lots would be.
AB 2097. Commissioner Heckman suggested, where feasible is, I think it solves the problem of what if you have a.
It seems like, I mean, if you're looking at Cal Ave, for example, we have a bunch of very small filled with the loading zone. So that for me. Loading zone spaces. One question I had for the Cal Ave or university area, isn't it the case that if they couldn't fund, isn't that right?
That's true for you.
Okay, so maybe what it is then is that, and so now we wouldn't see an ADA so that we can put those into our parking structures to owners. That's just an idea for the study session.
Yeah, I think I'm also comfortable with the study session. It is hard to really picture and project what requirements are appropriate. Not to kind of prelude that too much, but can we also clarify whether loading like a white stripe on the sidewalk as loading or kind of a loading zone in an alley or something similar could satisfy or has been used to satisfy this requirement before?
So I'll just refer to the existing code section regarding these related to site planning, circulation, and access. So this was in the director's adjustments with a maximum reduction of one loading space. So it allowed for a kind of administrative process to make that determination, unrelated to the 50 units thing, just existing code.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're probably not prepared to speak to the 50 units issue, but it's something we can research and come back.
Thank you. Yep.
Commissioner Rickdahl.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should have a study set 75. I have no idea right now. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have other comments? Because I'm not seeing anything. Oh, Commissioner Heckman. Sorry, I thought it was a ghost hand. Commissioner Heckman, go ahead. Commissioner Heckman, you're on mute.
Thank you. So I'm hearing some recommending this ordinance, and I think we've just heard that we have the luxury of some time. So I'm wondering if really we want to bring this back as a study session, or just bring it, because at a study session, I don't think we can move forward a recommendation, right, to come back to us so that we might be able to, at that next meeting, make a recommendation moving this forward to council. So it's really just more of a next step in the process question.
Thank you. If we could at least approve the staff recommendation with the exception of certain items that we hope that will come back to us, and then we can make a recommendation about to approve those remaining sections. Just so that when it comes back to us, we're not reopening up the whole thing for discussion again. Okay, would somebody like to take a stab at making a motion?
Would it help if I share screen again, the ordinance itself, so we can go section by section of the ordinance? Or has any?
My preference would be to hear from people who want to pull stuff out, because I mean, I'd be happy to have a study session. I feel strongly that there's stuff needs to be pulled out. Speak up.
Where did it go? I think it pertains to sections. I have to find it.
I think it pertains to section 18.52.040.
Does staff want us to cite sections or just topics?
The topic is sufficient. We'll
Okay.
work with that. Yeah.
So that will make it much easier to make a motion.
Okay.
Does somebody want to take a stab at a motion?
Okay. Okay. With exception that we would come back for a study session to talk about EVSE parking, handicap parking, and also loading zones.
I'll second it.
Do you want to add in Commissioner Heckman's suggestions as well as part of that motion?
Does that have to be part of the motion, or is that, he was just advising staff to scrub that? Commissioner Heckman, what do you think?
Yeah, so the first one is just a recital, and the second one I think is actually wrapped in the study session, because my last question was about on that 1852-040D, which I think is going to come back, that that where feasible, I think that's going to be part of the study session. So I don't think we need to wrap it in, and staff has some liberty to clean up things in an ordinance as it moves to council anyway.
Do we have additional discussion on the motion then? We've got a motion from Commissioner Rectal, a second from Commissioner Templeton. Looks like we've got two lights from Commissioner Suma and then Commissioner Aiken. Light.
I guess it's a question for the motion maker, whether I'm concerned that staff would need to evaluate. My concern was about in the shared parks, if work patterns really change.
That's tricky though, because if you've allowed someone to build a complex to unshared parking and then now work patterns change, well, you're kind of
Not building parking, it's better that they should be stuck than they're going to start parking. I mean, so many of the neighborhoods around downtown and Cal Ave, all of the neighborhoods have parking permit programs. So you can't go park there. So then, I mean, it's kind of, if you don't hold them to the commitment of shared parking, it's like having your cake and eating it too, potentially.
I have a question for Albert. How much of this is dictated by state law and how much flexibility do we have for the shared parking?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we have it meet certain standards. So,
sorry.
So if we wanted to put a stipulation that survey that's
law is actually pretty prescriptive on this. It says that we must approve the agreement if it includes a parking analysis using a peer-reviewed methodology developed by Professional Planning Association. So I don't think that we can add on to the method.
I was taken aback by the motion that it would be a study session rather than an action item. Because I thought we were leaning towards making a decision.
A study action, right?
Right. So do we need to rephrase our motion to make it clear that there will be?
I would say in a future action item, as opposed to. No, it would just be a single action item in our meeting. And it would not be a study session, but it would be an action item.
Discussed in the usual way.
That would be studied. I do agree. It should be an action item.
I will just chime in with a opposing viewpoint. It doesn't mean I'm gonna derail a motion, but what we're talking about is huge. Like, there's no way this is gonna fit in one meeting and we're gonna resolve on an outcome. Like, we're talking like I'm concerned that's not a one meeting conversation.
My view is that if it's an action item, you always can defer it and say, let's come back to part 2 after we chew on this. But if we all talk about it and really come to consensus, then I want the option to give a recommendation right there.
I theoretically, I like that most of the time when staff brings an action item. So anyway, either way, however we want to do it, it's fine. But if we want to just get to an action item, like we got it in front of us tonight, but the staff's not prepared.
Yeah, correct.
Well, my thought on that is that we do, because we simply don't have the data. But to your point, Commissioner Templeton, I think that, yes, we need to think more holistically and broadly about what do we do with our 2 major retail areas and the parking needs for specific audience, the implementation of AB 2097 in a way that doesn't permanently put into place things that we can't correct.
Okay.
So can you?
So you're happy with changing the motion? Okay.
Yeah, can you just restate the motion, Commissioner Rekdal, and then we can verify the second?
Returning for a future action item that will cover EGSC parking, handicap parking, and loading.
Pertaining to these areas.
Yep, correct.
Items that were in the presentation. That was the reduction of parking spaces.
EVSC is going to be going, EVSC is going to be in the future action.
It was
so the item in the staff presentation was unrelated to AB 2097.
I'll put it, oops, here. Okay. Am I sharing?
Yeah.
So this is about how to handle retrofits of existing parking spots.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is fine.
Yeah, I would include both these as part of the motion.
Great, thank you.
Approving both of these is recommending both of these.
And the seconder?
So this is part of the staff recommendation that goes forward, even though we don't have a date with council, but anyways, we're not bringing this piece back when we talk about, okay.
These 2 late ads, and we've got the first and the second on this motion. Can we?
I just think the whole thing should come back to us instead of approving part of it, because it's not a very big section, but it's very big changes. And why don't we read it all together in the final version, if anyone else feels that way?
Which section did you have in mind?
I think the
I'm
whole.
sorry, which
should come back to us the next time with the subjects that we've already expressed interest in changing and the few other tweaks.
I understand what your thought process is that maybe second time around we'll catch something, but I'm worried about getting what other people think.
I concur. I think I really appreciated the chair bringing that option up so that we can get the stuff that is less controversial off and have time to really focus on the other parking stuff.
Further comments? So then why don't we take a vote, Ms. Dow?
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Aiken,
yes.
motion